When Sarah Johnson, a 45-year-old immigrant from Senegal, walked into the Williams mansion in Beverly Hills on that Tuesday morning to clean the marble floors for $15 an hour, she had no idea that in exactly 1 hour and 12 minutes, she would be sitting in the most prestigious law office in Los Angeles, signing a $15 million settlement that would destroy the most powerful family in California forever. How did a woman who was publicly humiliated and had champagne thrown in her face by a billionaire's wife manage to completely annihilate their empire in less than 24 hours? And why did nobody see the most brilliant revenge plot in Hollywood history coming from someone they considered completely invisible? This is the true story of Sarah Johnson, the underestimated cleaning lady who transformed the worst day of her life into the most devastating legal checkmate ever witnessed in Beverly Hills, proving that the biggest mistake wealthy people make is assuming that the person scrubbing their toilets doesn't have the power to flush their entire fortune down the drain. In just 18 months, Sarah went from earning $2,400 a month cleaning bathrooms to becoming the owner of a $15 million settlement fund and the most feared legal consultant in Los Angeles. Her current net worth, over $30 million. Her former employer's current net worth, bankruptcy and federal prison. But let me take you back to that Tuesday morning in Bel Air, when everything changed forever. Sarah Johnson had been working as a domestic cleaner for 8 years in the exclusive neighborhood of Beverly Hills. Every morning at 7 sharp, she would take 2 buses from her small apartment in Inglewood to reach the multi-million-dollar mansions where she spent her days making other people's lives spotless. At 45, Sarah had weathered hands from years of scrubbing, cleaning uniforms that she washed every night in her tiny laundromat, and tired eyes that had seen more luxury in other people's homes than most people see in a lifetime. But what nobody knew, what absolutely nobody in those gleaming mansions suspected, was that Sarah Johnson held a law degree from the University of Dakar, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had spent 10 years as a legal consultant for international corporations before immigrating to the United States. The Williams family lived in a $40 million mansion on Roxbury Drive, complete with 12 bedrooms, 15 bathrooms, an Olympic-sized pool, and enough marble flooring to cover a small country. Robert Williams was a petroleum industry magnate whose company, Williams Oil Corporation, had contracts worth over $2 billion with governments across 3 continents. His wife, Victoria Williams, was a 43-year-old former beauty queen who spent her days organizing charity galas that raised money for causes she cared about and shopping trips that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Victoria Williams was everything Sarah Johnson was not. Blonde hair that cost $800 to maintain every month, designer clothes that carried price tags with more zeros than Sarah's bank account had ever seen, and an attitude of superiority that she wore like the most expensive piece of jewelry in her collection. Victoria moved through her mansion like a queen through her castle, completely convinced that the universe revolved around her perfect life, and that people like Sarah existed solely to make that life even more comfortable. But on that Tuesday morning, something was different in the Williams mansion. Victoria was hosting her monthly charity luncheon, where she and 12 of Beverly Hills' most influential women would gather to discuss their philanthropic projects while consuming champagne that cost more per bottle than Sarah earned in a week. The women who attended these luncheons were the wives of studio executives, tech moguls, and financial empire builders. They were women who measured their worth in terms of their husband's success and their own social influence. Women who had never cleaned their own homes or cooked their own meals. Women who viewed people like Sarah as nothing more than human furniture that occasionally needed to be dusted off. When Sarah arrived that morning, she could immediately sense the tension in the air. Victoria was pacing through the marble foyer in her $4,000 Louboutin heels, barking orders at the catering staff and checking every detail of the luncheon setup with the intensity of a military general preparing for battle. This was Victoria's opportunity to show off her perfect life to her most important social connections, and everything had to be absolutely flawless. Sarah began her work as she always did, quietly and efficiently. She started in the upstairs bedrooms, working her way methodically through each room with the practiced precision of someone who had perfected the art of invisible competence. She had learned over the years to make herself as unnoticed as possible in these homes, to complete her work without disturbing the lives of the people who lived there. In 8 years of cleaning houses in Beverly Hills, Sarah had developed a reputation for being reliable, thorough, and completely forgettable. But today would be different. Today, Sarah would become impossible to ignore. At exactly 11:30, while Sarah was cleaning the guest bathroom on the second floor, she overheard Victoria on the phone in the master bedroom. Victoria was speaking loudly, her voice carrying the particular edge that wealthy people develop when they believe themselves to be completely alone and unobserved. "Darling, you should see the cleaning girl today," Victoria was saying to whoever was on the other end of the call. "She's this little African woman, looks like she just stepped off the boat. I swear these people multiply like rabbits. Robert says I should be more careful about who we let into the house, but honestly, where else are we going to find someone willing to scrub our toilets for practically nothing?" Sarah's hands stopped moving. In 8 years of working in these homes, she had heard comments like this before, but never so casually cruel, never so completely dehumanizing. She continued cleaning, but something had shifted inside her chest, a familiar burning sensation that she recognized from her days as a legal consultant, when she would encounter corruption or injustice that needed to be exposed. "The best part is," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with amusement, "she probably thinks she's getting a good deal. $15 an hour to clean up after her betters. I mean, what else is someone like that going to do? It's not like she has any real skills." But Victoria Williams had no idea that Sarah Johnson's real skills included a comprehensive understanding of employment law, civil rights legislation, and international human rights frameworks. More importantly, Victoria had no idea that Sarah's phone was recording every word from the bathroom doorway. At exactly noon, the charity luncheon began in the Williams' formal dining room. 12 women, each wearing enough diamonds to fund a small school, gathered around a table that could seat 20, drinking champagne and discussing their various philanthropic endeavors. They talked about fundraising galas for homeless shelters, charity auctions for children's hospitals, and awareness campaigns for refugees, all while consuming a meal that cost more than most of their beneficiaries would see in 6 months. Sarah was finishing the upstairs bedrooms when she heard the conversation below become louder and more animated. The women were discussing their domestic help, sharing stories about the challenges of finding good help in Los Angeles. Each woman seemed to have her own collection of complaints about nannies who asked for raises, gardeners who missed days, and cleaning ladies who didn't appreciate their good fortune in finding employment with such generous families. Victoria Williams was holding court, regaling her guests with stories about the various domestic workers she had employed over the years. She described them like characters in an entertaining play, each one providing amusing anecdotes about the challenges of managing people who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of maintaining a sophisticated household. "The current one is actually quite efficient," Victoria was saying, her voice carrying clearly up the marble staircase. "Very quiet, very invisible. She's some kind of African, Senegalese, I think. Barely speaks English, but she gets the job done. And the best part is, she's so grateful for the work that she never complains about anything. It's refreshing, really, to have someone who knows her place." Sarah was standing at the top of the staircase, her cleaning supplies in hand, listening to herself being discussed like a piece of equipment. The burning sensation in her chest was growing stronger, but she remained perfectly still, perfectly quiet, perfectly invisible, just as they expected her to be. But then, Victoria Williams made the mistake that would cost her everything. "Ladies, let me show you exactly what I mean about knowing how to manage the help," Victoria announced. Sarah, get down here right now." Sarah descended the staircase slowly, her eyes focused on the marble steps, her expression carefully neutral. She entered the dining room where 12 of Beverly Hills' most powerful women were seated around the table, their faces turned toward her with the casual curiosity of people observing an interesting museum exhibit. "Sarah," Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness, I want you to meet my friends. These are very important women. Women who contribute millions of dollars to charity every year. Women who make a real difference in this world. The women at the table smiled politely. The kind of smiles that wealthy people give to service workers when they want to demonstrate their own magnanimity. Sarah nodded respectfully, still maintaining her carefully crafted persona of grateful submission. Now, Sarah, Victoria continued, I want you to tell these ladies how grateful you are for this job. Tell them how this work has changed your life. This was the moment when Victoria Williams crossed the line from casual racism into public humiliation. This was the moment when she decided to use Sarah as a prop in her performance of superior benevolence. This was the moment when she made the catastrophic error of assuming that the quiet African woman standing before her was too powerless, too desperate, too invisible to fight back. Sarah looked around the room at the 12 women who were waiting for her performance of gratitude. She saw their expensive jewelry, their designer clothing, their expressions of anticipatory satisfaction at witnessing this demonstration of their social superiority. And in that moment, Sarah Johnson made a decision that would change everything. Mrs. Williams, Sarah said quietly, her English suddenly clear and precise. I am indeed very grateful for this opportunity to observe how the wealthy ladies of Beverly Hills conduct themselves when they believe they are unobserved by anyone who matters. The room fell silent. Victoria's smile faltered, uncertainty flickering across her face as she tried to process what she had just heard. Sarah's voice had changed completely, the submissive murmur replaced by the confident tone of someone accustomed to being taken seriously in important conversations. Excuse me? Victoria said, her voice sharp with irritation. I said that I'm grateful, Sarah repeated, for the opportunity to document how easily cruelty disguises itself as charity when wealthy people believe their victims are powerless to respond. Now the silence in the room was electric. The 12 women at the table were staring at Sarah with expressions of shock and growing alarm. Victoria Williams was standing frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her lips, her mind struggling to reconcile the articulate woman speaking to her with the invisible cleaning lady she had been humiliating for months. How dare you speak to me like that? Victoria finally exploded. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who these women are? We could destroy your pathetic little life with a single phone call. Mrs. Williams, Sarah replied calmly. I know exactly who you are. You are Victoria Williams, wife of Robert Williams, CEO of Williams Oil Corporation. Your company has been under federal investigation for tax evasion for the past 8 months. Your husband's net worth is approximately $1.2 billion, derived primarily from petroleum contracts with corrupt governments in West Africa. Your charity foundation has donated less than 3% of its receipts to actual charitable causes, with the remaining 97% going to administrative costs, which is to say, funding your lifestyle. The color was draining from Victoria's face. Several of the women at the table had stopped breathing entirely. Your monthly charity luncheons, Sarah continued, are tax-deductible business expenses that you use to maintain social connections beneficial to your husband's business interests. The catering alone for today's event cost $4,700, which your accountant will list as a charitable donation to reduce your family's tax liability. Who are you? Victoria whispered. My name is Sarah Johnson, Sarah replied. I hold a law degree from the University of Dakar, where I graduated summa cum laude. I spent 10 years as a legal consultant for international corporations before immigrating to the United States. I speak French, English, Wolof, and Spanish fluently. I have been cleaning your house for 8 months, during which time I have observed and documented systematic patterns of tax fraud, employment law violations, and what I believe to be money laundering through your husband's charitable foundation. The room was now completely silent, except for the sound of someone's champagne glass hitting the marble floor and shattering. But more immediately relevant to today's situation, Sarah continued, is the fact that for the past 30 minutes, I have been recording this entire conversation on my phone. I have documented your casual use of racial slurs, your public humiliation of a domestic worker, and your guests' enthusiastic participation in what federal law defines as workplace harassment based on national origin. Victoria Williams was now standing with her mouth open, her face completely white except for 2 bright red spots on her cheeks. The 12 most powerful women in Beverly Hills were staring at Sarah like she had just revealed herself to be a supernatural being. "This recording," Sarah said, reaching into her apron pocket and holding up her phone, "is already being automatically uploaded to cloud storage. Copies are being sent to my personal lawyer, the Los Angeles Times, CNN, the federal prosecutors investigating your husband's company, and the Internal Revenue Service." "You can't do this," Victoria said, her voice now shaking. "This is blackmail. This is illegal." "Mrs. Williams," Sarah replied with a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. "What I am doing is perfectly legal. California is a one-party consent state, which means that I have every right to record conversations that I am participating in. What you have been doing, however, creating a hostile work environment based on racial discrimination, is a federal crime." Sarah walked to the head of the table where Victoria was standing frozen in shock and looked directly into her eyes. "But let me make something very clear," Sarah said. "This is not blackmail. I am not asking you for money to make this go away. What I am doing is ensuring that your actions have consequences. What I am doing is making sure that your casual cruelty is exposed to the same social circle that you were trying to impress with your demonstration of power over someone you believed to be powerless." Sarah turned to address the 12 women at the table, who were staring at her with expressions of absolute terror. "Ladies," Sarah said, "you have been witnesses to and participants in a federal civil rights violation. I suggest you contact your lawyers immediately, because within the next hour, this recording will be in the hands of every major media outlet in Los Angeles, and you will all be identifiable in the video." With that, Sarah Johnson placed her cleaning supplies on the marble floor, removed her apron, and walked out of the Williams mansion forever. But the story was just beginning. Within 20 minutes of leaving the mansion, Sarah was sitting in the office of Marcus Rodriguez, senior partner at Rodriguez, Chen & Associates, the most prestigious civil rights law firm in Los Angeles. Marcus had been Sarah's friend since law school, and when he received her emergency call, he cleared his schedule immediately. "Sarah," Marcus said, reviewing the recording on her phone, "this is absolutely devastating. The recording quality is perfect, the content is undeniable, and the setting makes it even worse. These women essentially created a public tribunal to humiliate you in front of witnesses." "Marcus," Sarah replied, "I don't want a settlement. I don't want this to go away quietly. I want justice. I want consequences. And I want everyone to see exactly what happens when wealthy people believe their victims are too powerless to fight back." Marcus smiled. He had been waiting his entire career for a case like this. "Sarah," he said, "by the time we're finished with this, Victoria Williams is going to wish she had treated you like royalty." At exactly 2 o'clock that afternoon, while Victoria Williams was still trying to explain to her husband what had happened at the luncheon, the story broke simultaneously on CNN, the Los Angeles Times, TMZ, and every major social media platform in America. The video was devastating. Victoria Williams, dressed in her $4,000 outfit, standing in her $40 million dining room, surrounded by Beverly Hills elite, publicly humiliating an African immigrant worker for the entertainment of her wealthy friends. The contrast was so stark, the cruelty so casual, the racism so undeniable, that the story immediately went viral. Within 4 hours, the hashtag #GARTJusticeForSarah was trending worldwide. Within 6 hours, protesters were gathering outside the Williams mansion. Within 8 hours, Williams Oil Corporation's stock price had dropped by 30%. But Sarah Johnson wasn't finished. That evening, Sarah held a press conference outside the Rodriguez law firm's Beverly Hills office. Standing before a crowd of reporters and cameras, wearing a simple black dress that she had purchased that afternoon with her first advance payment from Marcus Rodriguez, Sarah told her story to the world. "My name is Sarah Johnson," she began. "I am a legal professional, an immigrant, and a human being who refuses to be invisible anymore. She described her education, her professional background, and the circumstances that had brought her to Los Angeles. She explained how she had taken cleaning work, not because she lacked other skills, but because her foreign credentials weren't recognized in the United States, and she needed to support her family while navigating the complex process of professional certification. For 8 months, Sarah told the cameras, I cleaned the homes of people who treated me like I was subhuman. I scrubbed their toilets while they discussed me like I was a piece of property. I endured their casual racism because I needed the income to feed my children and pay for the legal courses that would allow me to practice law in this country. The crowd of reporters was completely silent, hanging on every word. But today, Sarah continued, Victoria Williams made the mistake of believing that humiliating me publicly would demonstrate her power. Instead, she demonstrated something else entirely. She showed the world exactly what happens when privilege becomes so absolute that it loses all connection to basic human decency. Sarah paused, looking directly into the cameras. I am not seeking revenge, she said. I am seeking justice. Justice for every domestic worker who has been treated like property. Justice for every immigrant who has been dismissed as worthless. Justice for every person who has been underestimated because of their accent, their job, or their background. The press conference was broadcast live on every major news network. By the next morning, Sarah Johnson was the most famous domestic worker in America. But while Sarah was becoming a national hero, Victoria Williams was watching her entire world collapse. The backlash was swift and merciless. Williams Oil Corporation lost 2 major contracts within 24 hours, costing the company over $400 million. Robert Williams was summoned to emergency meetings with his board of directors, who were demanding his resignation. The family's charitable foundation was placed under federal investigation. Victoria was banned from every exclusive club and charity organization in Beverly Hills. But the personal consequences were even more devastating. The video had revealed Victoria Williams to be exactly the kind of person that wealthy society pretends doesn't exist among their ranks. An unrepentant racist whose cruelty was matched only by her stupidity. She had become a pariah in her own social circle, toxic to anyone who wanted to maintain their reputation for enlightened philanthropy. 3 days after the incident, Robert Williams called Sarah's lawyer. Mr. Rodriguez, Robert said, his voice strained with desperation. My client would like to discuss a settlement. My client isn't interested in a settlement, Marcus replied. My client is interested in a federal civil rights trial where every detail of your family's behavior will be examined under oath in a public courtroom. Please, Robert said, you have to understand, this situation is destroying everything we've built. My company is hemorrhaging money. My wife is having a nervous breakdown, and federal investigators are crawling all over our finances. What will it take to make this go away? Mr. Williams, Marcus said, your wife recorded herself committing federal crimes while surrounded by witnesses. This isn't going away. This is going to trial, and when it does, every ugly detail of how your family treats the people who work for you is going to be public record. That evening, Robert Williams received even worse news. The federal investigation that Sarah had mentioned wasn't just about taxes. The IRS had discovered that Williams Oil Corporation had been funneling money through their charitable foundation to avoid paying federal taxes, and the FBI had found evidence of bribery involving government contracts in 3 different countries. Within a week, the Williams family went from being one of the most powerful families in Los Angeles to being the subject of multiple federal investigations and the most hated people in America. But Sarah Johnson's transformation was even more dramatic. Major law firms across the country were calling to offer her positions. Universities were inviting her to speak about immigrant rights and workplace discrimination. Publishers were offering book deals. Television producers were discussing documentary projects. But Sarah had a different plan. Marcus, she said during one of their strategy meetings, I want to start my own practice. I want to specialize in representing domestic workers, immigrants, and other people who get treated like I was treated. Sarah, Marcus replied, with the settlement we're going to get from this case, you'll have enough money to start the most successful civil rights practice in California. The settlement negotiation took place 6 weeks after the incident, in a conference room at Rodriguez, Chen and Associates. Robert Williams sat across from Sarah, flanked by 4 expensive lawyers, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 6 weeks. "Mrs. Johnson," Robert began, "I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. What she did was inexcusable, and I take full responsibility for creating an environment where such behavior was possible." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Mr. Williams, your apology is noted, but apologies don't repair the damage caused by systematic dehumanization of vulnerable workers." "What do you want?" Robert asked. "I want $15 million in compensatory damages," Sarah said. "I want your wife to serve community service working in immigrant support programs. I want your company to establish a fund for domestic worker rights advocacy. And I want a written admission that your family's treatment of domestic workers constituted illegal discrimination." Robert Williams looked at his lawyers, who nodded grimly. The alternative was a public trial that would expose even more damaging information about the family's finances and behavior. "Agreed," Robert said. 6 months later, Sarah Johnson opened the Johnson Institute for Worker Rights in a gleaming office building in downtown Los Angeles. Her staff included 12 lawyers, 6 investigators, and a support team dedicated to representing domestic workers, immigrants, and other vulnerable employees who faced discrimination and exploitation. Victoria Williams completed 500 hours of community service at the Los Angeles Immigration Center, where she worked under the supervision of people who had once been in Sarah's position. The experience, according to news reports, was transformative, though Victoria declined all requests for interviews. Robert Williams resigned as CEO of Williams Oil Corporation, which was eventually sold to pay federal fines and legal settlements. The family moved to a modest home in Orange County, where they live quietly, their former influence and social standing completely destroyed. But the most significant transformation belonged to Sarah Johnson herself. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident, Sarah held another press conference, this time from her own office, surrounded by her legal team and representatives of the dozens of clients they had successfully defended. "1 year ago," Sarah said, "Victoria Williams tried to use me as a prop in her performance of superiority. She believed that I was powerless, voiceless, and invisible. She was wrong on every count." Sarah gestured to the plaques on her office wall, representing successful cases, legislative changes, and policy reforms that her institute had achieved in just 12 months. The Johnson Institute has recovered over $40 million in stolen wages for domestic workers. We have prosecuted 67 cases of workplace discrimination. We have helped change employment laws in 3 states. And we have proven that the most dangerous mistake powerful people can make is assuming that their victims lack the intelligence, resources, or determination to fight back. Sarah paused, looking directly into the cameras. But the most important lesson from this story isn't about revenge or justice, though both of those things matter. The most important lesson is about recognizing the humanity and dignity of every person, regardless of their job, their background, or their circumstances. Victoria Williams saw a cleaning lady and assumed she was seeing someone who didn't matter. What she was actually seeing was a highly educated professional who was temporarily working in domestic service while building a better life for her family. Sarah smiled, the same smile that had once terrified Victoria Williams, but now filled with warmth and satisfaction. Every person you encounter has a story, has skills, has dreams, and has value that extends far beyond their current circumstances. The person cleaning your office might be a lawyer. The person serving your coffee might be a teacher. The person caring for your children might be an engineer. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who you're really talking to. The press conference ended with thunderous applause, but Sarah's work was just beginning. Today, the Johnson Institute for Worker Rights is the most successful civil rights law firm on the West Coast. Sarah Johnson has been featured on the cover of Time magazine, invited to speak at the United Nations, and honored by 3 presidents for her work in advancing human rights and workplace equality. Victoria Williams, meanwhile, has become a cautionary tale told in business schools and ethics classes across the country. Her name is synonymous with the dangers of unchecked privilege and casual cruelty. The video of her humiliating Sarah Johnson is shown in diversity training sessions at major corporations as an example of how quickly racist behavior can destroy careers and companies. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of Sarah's story is how it changed the lives of countless other domestic workers and immigrants who saw that it was possible to fight back against injustice, even when the odds seemed impossible. The woman who was supposed to be invisible became impossible to ignore. The woman who was supposed to be powerless became one of the most influential civil rights advocates in the country. The woman who was supposed to know her place showed the world that her place was wherever she decided it should be. And it all started with one moment of courage, when Sarah Johnson decided that she would not be silent anymore. As Sarah often tells the crowds of young lawyers and activists who attend her speaking engagements, the most powerful weapon against injustice isn't money or connections or social status. It's the refusal to accept that your circumstances define your worth. Victoria Williams thought she was putting me in my place. Instead, she helped me realize that my place was much higher than either of us had imagined. The cleaning lady became the lawyer. The victim became the victor. And the woman who was supposed to be forgotten became unforgettable. That's the power of refusing to remain invisible. That's the power of fighting back. That's the power of proving that every person, no matter how humble their current circumstances, has the potential to change the world. If you found Sarah's story inspiring, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to hear more incredible stories of ordinary people who achieved extraordinary justice. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that they are more powerful than they know, and that their current circumstances don't define their future possibilities. The next viral story of triumph over injustice might